My fiancée shut me out of the family trip I paid for after her mom brought her ex, so I shut the cards down and left them broke overseas. I never thought seeing a plate of pasta could unravel my entire life. But in that split second, on a video call from half a world away, I saw something that ripped my future apart. It was late evening in Seattle, quiet in my apartment, just the hum of the fridge. I'd been doing this for days now, this nightly ritual of video calls, but tonight, a knot in my stomach was tightening. My name is Leo, I'm 34, an architect. I'm not exactly rich, but I'm comfortable. The kind of guy who meticulously plans his finances, maxes out his retirement, reads every credit card term. I met Chloe 3 years ago at a friend's wedding. She was breathtaking, the kind of person who just lights up a room. We clicked instantly, and within 6 months, I knew she was it, the one I wanted to build a future with. She moved into my apartment, we adopted a cat, talked about kids, where we'd retire. All the normal dreams. Last March, I proposed at a little Greek restaurant downtown. She said yes before I even finished asking, and I remember thinking, this is happiness. This complete certainty. Everything was perfect until about 6 months ago. Chloe started talking more about her family, specifically how her mom, Brenda, had always dreamed of visiting Greece but never had the money. Her family wasn't poor, but a European trip was definitely outside their budget. Chloe brought it up a few times, never directly asking, but always with this sad, wistful tone. One night, I just said it. I'd pay for the whole family, Chloe, Brenda, and her younger sister, Mia, to go to Greece for 10 days. Her face lit up. I felt like a hero, doing something so generous for the family of the woman I loved. Looking back, I can see the naive idiocy of it all. But then, it felt right, like what you do when you're joining a family. The trip was set for late September. In July, I started planning everything. Booked the flights on my card for the points, reserved hotels in Athens, Santorini, and Mykonos, nice places, not luxury, but good reviews. I set up a separate checking account just for their expenses, transferred $8,000 into it, and gave Chloe the debit card. I trust you, I told her. Use it for food, museums, train tickets, whatever makes the trip better. Enjoy it without worrying about money. I really meant it. I wasn't looking for receipts, I just wanted them to have an amazing time. Chloe was ecstatic, saying how lucky she was, how Brenda would cry. I felt incredible, like I was investing in my future family. The only strange part was that I wasn't going. Chloe said Brenda wanted it to be a girls' trip, some bonding time before the wedding. I didn't think much of it, I had a big project at work anyway and couldn't take 10 days off. They left on a Friday morning. I drove them to the airport at 5 a.m., helped with bags, kissed Chloe goodbye, and told them to send lots of photos. The first few days were fine. Chloe texted me pictures of ancient ruins, incredible dishes, Brenda smiling in front of fountains. We video called every evening around 8 p.m. my time, which was 3 a.m. in Greece. But something felt off during those calls. I couldn't place it. Chloe would always step onto a balcony or into a bathroom, never showing me the room or anyone else. Her answers to my questions were vague, almost evasive. I told myself I was being paranoid, that she was probably tired, or trying not to wake her mom and sister. But this knot in my stomach got tighter every night. I hated that feeling, I didn't want to be the jealous, controlling fiancé. On the 4th night, I called at our usual time. Chloe picked up, on video. She was at a restaurant, I could see candles and wine glasses. I asked how dinner was. She was smiling, saying it was great, the food was incredible. Then the camera shifted, just for a second. A quick pan across the table. And I saw him. Clear as day, sitting right next to her, a plate of pasta in front of him. Noah. Her ex-boyfriend. The guy she dated for 2 years before me. Sitting at a table in Athens. On my dime. My brain froze. I couldn't process it. Chloe must have realized because she quickly said, "Oh, my service is cutting out. I'll call you tomorrow," and ended the call before I could say a word. I just sat there, staring at my phone, at my own reflection in the black glass. The entire floor felt like it had disappeared. I didn't call back. I didn't text. I did nothing for about 20 minutes, forcing myself to think clearly, not let emotions take over. I started going through the facts in my head, like an architectural problem. Fact 1, her ex was in Greece with them. Fact 2, she hadn't mentioned it before they left. Fact 3, she'd been acting weird on our calls all week. Fact 4, she ended the call the second I saw him. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't some coincidence where they ran into him at a landmark. This was planned. She knew he was coming, and she didn't tell me. Which meant she knew I wouldn't be okay with it. Which meant she chose to lie by omission rather than have an honest conversation. I felt physically sick. Not angry yet, just this deep, sinking feeling of being played for a fool. I opened my banking app, checked the trip account. They'd spent about $4,000 so far. More than I expected for 4 days, but I had told her not to worry about money. I sat there for an hour, just thinking, trying to comprehend what kind of person does this. What kind of person takes their ex on a trip their fiancé paid for and thinks that's acceptable? The rage came later, but in that moment, I just felt hollow, like something essential had been ripped from my chest. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch in the dark, replaying the video call. Seeing Noah's face next to hers, the wine glasses, the casual way they sat together. By 3 a.m., I'd made my decision. It wasn't emotional. It was based on a simple principle: my money comes with an assumption of honesty. The second that's gone, the money should be gone, too. I wasn't going to strand them in Greece. I'm not that person. The flights home were paid for, the hotels prepaid through booking confirmations. They had a roof over their heads and a way back to Seattle. But everything else, every meal, museum ticket, train ride, that was coming out of their own pockets now. I was done funding whatever this trip had become. At 6 a.m. Seattle time, I logged into my bank, froze the debit card, and transferred the remaining $4,000 back to my main account. It took maybe 90 seconds. When it was done, I felt a strange calm. Not satisfaction, but clarity. Like I'd finally stopped being a passive participant in my own life. The call came about 4 hours later. It was early afternoon in Greece. My phone buzzed with Chloe's name. I almost didn't answer, but I knew I had to face this. I picked up, and immediately heard yelling. "No, hello, just, what the hell did you do? The card isn't working. We're stuck at a restaurant, it got declined." Her voice was high, panicked. I could hear Brenda saying something sharp in the background. I kept my voice level. "The card's frozen. The account is closed. You have enough to get home, but that's it." There was a stunned pause. Then she started crying, not sad crying, but angry crying. Telling me I was cruel, controlling. How could I do this to her family, to Brenda, who'd dreamed of this trip her whole life? I let her finish, then asked the only question that mattered. Was Noah invited, or did he just show up? The line went quiet for a few seconds. Then she said Brenda had invited him because he'd always wanted to see Greece, and it seemed mean to exclude him. That answer told me everything. This wasn't some last-minute thing. Brenda had planned this weeks ago, and Chloe had gone along with it, never saying a word. I asked when she found out. She admitted she'd known for about 2 weeks before the trip. Brenda had told her, and she didn't know how to tell me because she knew I'd be upset. She kept saying, "It doesn't mean anything. He's just a friend now. Mom thought it would be nice for him." I remember thinking how insulting it was that she thought I'd believe that I was stupid enough to think her ex-boyfriend was a charity case her mom wanted to include on a romantic trip through Greece. I told her, you had 2 weeks to tell me, and you chose not to. You chose to let me find out by accident. That tells me exactly how much you respect me. She argued I was unfair, that Brenda had put her in an impossible position, that she couldn't say no to her own mother. But here's the thing about impossible positions, they're only impossible if you're not willing to make a choice. Chloe had made hers. She'd chosen her mom's comfort over my trust. And now she was mad about the consequences. Her sister, Mia, got on the phone, younger and angrier than Chloe. She called me petty and vindictive, said I was ruining their trip over nothing. I asked if she'd known about Noah. Of course I knew, she snapped. Everyone knew except you. That hurt worse than anything Chloe had said. It meant all three of them had sat around, discussing this, probably laughing at how clueless I was, how easy it was to spend my money while lying to my face. Mia called me controlling and said, real men don't use money as a weapon. I told her, real partners don't lie for 2 weeks straight. I'm not controlling anything. I'm just not paying for it anymore. I heard Brenda in the background, saying I was disrespectful, that she'd raised Chloe better than to be with someone so cold. The irony of her calling me disrespectful, while she invited my fiancé's ex on a trip I funded, wasn't lost on me. But I didn't bother pointing it out. These weren't people who were suddenly going to see reason. Chloe got back on the phone. Her voice had changed. It wasn't angry anymore, but pleading. Please, baby, I'm so sorry. I should have told you. Just unfreeze the card and we'll talk about this when I get home. Part of me wanted to give in. I'd loved this woman for 3 years, and hearing her cry made my chest physically ache. But a bigger part of me knew that if I backed down now, I'd be teaching her that lying works, as long as you apologize after you get caught. I told her the decision was final. They had everything they needed to get home safely, and we'd talk when she was back in Seattle. She asked what that meant, if I was breaking up with her. I honestly didn't know the answer yet. I just said, I don't know what this means. I just know I'm done pretending this is okay. Before she could respond, I hung up and put my phone face down. I knew the calls and texts would keep coming, and I needed space to think. When I finally checked it a few hours later, there were over 50 messages. From Chloe, apologizing, explaining, begging. From Mia, calling me every name she could think of. From numbers I didn't recognize, which I assumed were Brenda's, though I didn't bother checking. I spent that whole day in my apartment, just sitting with what had happened, trying to figure out how I'd missed the signs that Chloe wasn't the person I thought she was. The thing that kept coming back wasn't even about Noah being there. It was about the lying. About how easy it had been for her to look me in the eye every day for 2 weeks, knowing what was coming, and not saying anything. That's not a mistake. That's not a moment of weakness. That's a character trait. If she could lie about this, she could lie about anything. I thought about all the times she'd stepped away during our video calls. How she'd never shown me who else was in the room. How she kept her answers vague, like she was trying not to slip up. She'd been managing me, feeding me just enough information to keep me happy while hiding the truth. That realization made me feel like I'd been dating a stranger. My brother called that evening. Chloe had apparently reached out to him. He asked what was going on in this careful voice, like he was talking to someone on a ledge. I told him the whole story. He was quiet for a minute before saying, "Man, that's messed up, but are you sure freezing the card was the right move?" I asked him what he would have done, and he admitted he didn't know. But he said it felt extreme. Everyone wanted to tell me I'd gone too far, that I should have just had a conversation. But none of them seemed to understand that the conversation was supposed to happen before the lying, not after. I didn't cut off the card to punish Chloe. I cut it off because continuing to pay for that trip would have meant accepting what she'd done. And I wasn't going to do that. The money wasn't the point. It was about drawing a line and saying, this is where my generosity ends, and my self-respect begins. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I realized something that genuinely scared me. If I took her back without real consequences, this would be my marriage. A relationship where she made decisions behind my back and apologized only when she got caught. I thought about being 45, with kids and a mortgage, finding out she'd been hiding things for years, bigger things than an ex-boyfriend on vacation. I knew I couldn't let this go just because confronting it was uncomfortable. She'd chosen to protect her mom's feelings over our relationship. That told me everything about where I ranked in her priorities. They got back to Seattle 5 days later. I knew because Chloe texted me from the airport, asking if I'd pick them up. I didn't respond. The answer was obviously no, and I figured silence said that clearly enough. She called twice, I let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened, she sounded exhausted and defeated, saying they'd taken an Uber, and she wanted to talk as soon as possible. I'd spent those 5 days preparing for this conversation, not rehearsing lines, but getting myself into the right headspace. Reminding myself that love doesn't mean accepting disrespect, and sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. She showed up at my apartment the next morning. She still had her key, so she let herself in. I was on the couch with coffee when she walked into the living room. She looked terrible, tired, pale, like she'd been crying for days. My first instinct was to comfort her, because that's what 3 years of loving someone does to you. But I stayed seated and asked her to say what she came to say. She sat down across from me and started apologizing, saying she knew she'd messed up and should have told me about Noah from the beginning. She said Brenda had sprung it on her 2 weeks before the trip. Noah had apparently been talking about wanting to visit Greece, and Brenda thought it would be nice to include him since he'd always been good to their family. Chloe said she panicked, didn't know how to tell me because she knew I'd either be hurt or try to stop the trip entirely. She convinced herself it would be easier to just let it happen and deal with the fallout later. I asked her if she understood why that was worse, why choosing to hide it was worse than the actual situation. She nodded, said she did now, but at the time she was just trying to keep everyone happy. That phrase, trying to keep everyone happy, that's what made me realize this wasn't fixable. She'd included everyone in that equation except me. I told her, you weren't trying to keep me happy. You were trying to keep me ignorant. There's a difference. She started crying again, saying she loved me, that this didn't change anything between us. But it changed everything. I'd spent 3 years thinking I was with someone who valued honesty. And it turned out I was with someone who valued avoiding conflict more. I asked her about Noah, about what he was doing there beyond just tagging along. She swore nothing happened, that he slept in a separate room, and they barely talked except at group dinners. I told her I actually believed that, because this wasn't about whether she cheated. It was about whether she respected me enough to include me in decisions that affected our relationship. She kept saying Brenda had put her in an impossible position. That if she'd said no to Noah coming, Brenda would have been hurt and angry. I looked at her and said, so, you chose your mom's comfort over my trust, and now you're surprised that has consequences? She didn't have an answer for that. She just sat there crying, asking what she could do to fix this. I'd been thinking about that question for days. I realized there wasn't anything she could do, because the problem wasn't a mistake. It was her instinct when faced with a difficult choice. Her instinct was to lie, smooth things over, and hope for the best. That's not something you fix with an apology. That's something fundamental about how a person operates. I told her I needed time, that I wasn't making any permanent decisions right then, but I couldn't just go back to normal like nothing happened. She asked if I wanted her to move out. I said yes, at least temporarily, because I needed space to think without her physically being in my apartment. She looked devastated and asked if this meant we were breaking up. I told her, honestly, I don't know what this means yet, but I know that right now I don't trust you. And I don't know if that's something I can get back. She packed a bag that afternoon, took some clothes and toiletries, and the cat, because she'd always been closer to him anyway. When she left, she turned at the door and said, I'm so sorry, Leo. I never meant to hurt you. I believe she never meant to hurt me. But I also knew that intention doesn't erase impact. And the impact of her choices was that I'd spent 2 weeks feeling like an idiot while funding a vacation that included her ex-boyfriend. The next few weeks were strange. We'd text occasionally. She'd update me on where she was staying, which was with Mia, and she'd ask if I was ready to talk yet. My friends were split. Half thought I should forgive her, everyone makes mistakes, the relationship was otherwise good. The other half thought I should walk away, because if she'd lie about this, she'd lie about anything. I spent a lot of time thinking about what marriage to Chloe would actually look like. I kept coming back to the same image, me finding out years later that she'd made major decisions without telling me because she didn't want to deal with conflict. Maybe about money, or where we lived, or how we raised our kids. But the pattern would be the same. Her avoiding difficult conversations, and me feeling blindsided when the truth came out. I realized I didn't want that life. I didn't want to spend 40 years wondering what else I didn't know. About a month after she moved out, I asked her to meet me for coffee. I told her I couldn't do this anymore. That I loved her, but I didn't trust her, and I didn't see a path back to trusting her. She cried, asked if I was really going to throw away 3 years over one mistake. I told her, it's not one mistake. It's a choice you made every single day for 2 weeks. Every time you looked at me and didn't tell me what was happening, you chose this outcome. She left that coffee shop, and I haven't spoken to her since, except through text about logistics, who keeps what furniture, that kind of thing. Her family thinks I'm cruel. I know that because Mia posted something vague on social media about men who use money to control women. I'm sure Chloe's told her version of the story where I'm the villain who abandoned her over nothing. But I'm okay with being the villain in someone else's story, because I know what actually happened. I know I gave her a chance to be honest, and she chose not to take it. 3 months later, I'm doing fine. I'm not dating anyone yet, but I'm not closed off to it either. Mostly, I just feel relieved that I figured out who Chloe really was before we got married instead of after. People ask me if I regret how I handled it, if I wish I'd been less extreme. Honestly, no. I don't regret it. Because that moment when I froze the card was the moment I decided my self-respect mattered more than keeping the peace. Chloe isn't a bad person. She's just someone who prioritizes avoiding conflict over being honest. That's fine for her, but it's not fine for me. I think about that video call sometimes, seeing Noah sitting there next to her. I remember the feeling in my stomach, that drop of realization that I'd been lied to. That feeling taught me something important. It taught me that generosity without boundaries is just being a doormat. And that trust, once broken, doesn't heal just because someone says they're sorry. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just clear about what I deserve. And what I deserve is someone who tells me the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Someone who includes me in decisions that affect us both. Chloe wasn't that person, and I'm glad I found out when I did. Losing money hurts, but losing years to the wrong person hurts more. What would you have done in my shoes?